Good afternoon. Today we'll be discussing virtual machines. We'll start by asking, what is a virtual machine? Well, it's simple, really. A virtual machine is a machine that allows you to run a different operating system utilizing the same hardware that was presented with your original machine, or what the virtual machine would call your host machine, to install and operate on a different operating system. An example of that would be something like, let's say, operating a Linux machine on a Windows machine. A machine can mean anything. It can mean anything from a desktop to a tablet to a handheld device to anything you could think of. Really, what a machine is it's hardware that allows you to operate a machine or a operating system. So really, continuing. So the real question is, how do I run an operating machine? Well, to be honest, we run an operating machine by installing or downloading and installing an application that allows you to operate a machine. There are several options that we have in place. I personally, thank you to computer security, have installed a machine called Virtual Machine, or VMware. I have the app called Workstation. Here it is, kind of magnified, a little blown up. As you can see, I have absolutely nothing installed on this machine. And this machine is very simple to use. It's a very user-friendly GUI. Because I don't have one on here, I can go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and create a new machine. I'm going to do the walkthrough on how to create a new machine. And it'll kind of explain what a virtual machine is and really how we use this machine. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this Create New Virtual Machine here. This machine this application that I'm using is a paid application. I have a license due to my student academia in the computer science or computer security realm. Those are the only people that got one. So unfortunately, you won't be able to use this one unless you are in computer security. So to begin with, we're going to start. Most machines have this thing called a new virtual machine wizard. Really a wizard of some kind. It's basically going to help you make it as user-friendly as possible. For us, we're going to typically go with a typical machine. There's no reason. I am personally not advanced enough to do a custom or advanced install of a machine, so we're going to continue with typical. So first I'm going to click Next. Now here it's going to ask me which operation installation I would like to use. Notice the keyword guest. That's an important keyword because your machine that you're currently operating on that doesn't use this application is your host machine. That is a very important keyword. Host represents the machine itself that you are currently on, the machine that is actually using and is tapped to and installed on your current set of hardware. Virtual machines will allow you to install multiple operating systems on what's called virtual hardware, which accesses your current hardware, and you can continue from there. So I personally have already downloaded a ISO file, or installer disk image file. You can find these on multiple different websites. Mine are all pretty much under downloads. As you can see, I have several. This one here is I believe the free BSD disk image. I have 2 versions of Linux and 3 versions of Ubuntu. All of these are the same, just a different flavor for the aspect of installation. For me, I prefer Mint, so I'm going to continue with Mint. Mint actually has, this is Linux Mint right here. Mint actually has multiple different varieties. Cinnamon is just the variety I'm going to use for this particular installation. So I'm going to go ahead and click Continue, or click it, and then click OK. Mind you, I'm operating on a Windows machine. This would be different for a Mac, although VMware, this application that I'm using, does not allow you to access. This wouldn't actually work on a Mac. There is a particular VMware that does work for Mac called VMware Fusion. Fusion is what you would like to use if you were working on a Macintosh. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and click Open. It says could not detect which operating system. That's fine. For us, we're just going to go ahead and click Next. For us, it's a Linux machine. As you can see, there are several guest operating systems. We have Microsoft Windows, VMware ESX. I'm not exactly sure what that is. Solaris, very similar to Sun operating systems, very common for very primitive data types, things you would use on a much smaller scale. We then have Novell NetWare. Unfortunately, I'm unaware of exactly what that is. Linux. Version, Ubuntu. We can click on the drop down and we'll see what kind of versions of Ubuntu there are. Or versions of Linux there are. There are many different kinds, as you can see. I mean, we have anything from Asian Ubuntu to CentOS, Debian, Fedora, Novell. But typically when you're installing something that is similar to Ubuntu, which through your own personal research, you can find that Ubuntu, for us 64-bit, is very commonly what the more user-friendly GUIs are based off of. So for us, we're going to be using Ubuntu 64-bit. I'm going to go ahead and click Next. And my virtual bit name, it says that I have multiple virtual bit, Ubuntu 6 bits, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that and just leave it as 1 and see what happens. Now we're going to go ahead and click Next. This is the location at which I want to install this virtual machine. I want it in my virtual machines folder because that's a good place to keep it. You can create your folder wherever you'd like. Mine's under my documents, under my specific user title. I'm clicking Next to continue. Oh, it says it already exists. So unfortunately, it's not going to let me do that. So I'm going to go ahead and call this Ubuntu 64-bit version 2. Go ahead and click Next. Here we want to know how much space we would really like to get this system under. So here it says recommended size for Ubuntu is 20 gigs. If you can read this, this is pretty standard. As I walk through the next installation of a operating system through a virtual machine, I'll kind of go into detail on what these actually mean. However, for our current state, this is basically your storage size. So if you think about your current machine, whereas my current machine, it has around 500 gigabytes of memory or hard drive space. This is going to allow me to create a 20 gigabyte hard drive. Ubuntu is a fairly lightweight system. If you want, or if we would like, we could go up to 25 or down to, I believe the minimum that I would recommend is 8. I wouldn't go any less than 8 because the system itself, you have to pay attention to how much Ubuntu actually uses. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at 20 because I'm planning on deleting this virtual machine once we're done with this introduction to how virtual machines work. And I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Split virtual machine into multiple files. I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory. It makes sense, really. It wants me to customize my hardware. If I had something like a graphics processor, like if this was on a desktop and not my laptop, I might actually utilize customized hardware. I will open it up just to show you. As you can tell, it tells me what processors I want to use, the network adapter. See, me personally, because I'm using VMware, this is dependent on what you actually want to utilize your virtual machine for. I personally like to be able to utilize for what do I want to access is essentially what this network adapter is for. If you would like to do things like a network scan using programs like Nmap, this would be a good thing to select. However, I am going to use this for that, potentially. And so I'm going to go ahead and leave this network adapter not as NAT, but I'm going to specify as custom. The reason I'm doing custom is because VMware grants you a bunch of different virtual networks. I personally would like to use the host only, because I want it to be able to see whatever the host sees, which the host represents my current machine, this machine here where I'm highlighting specified applications on VBAR. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with, so I've set that now to custom. It's going to operate on my host network. And present, that it'll be very similar to how you would set up anything, really. Memory, I could adjust this. My current machine, I believe, has 6 gigabytes of RAM. I'm going to leave it at 1 gigabyte. Luckily for me, most versions of Linux are fairly lightweight. They don't require a lot of memory. So 1 gigabyte should be plenty for what I'm trying to use. USB controller. This here will set what your various USBs do. It basically says this present says use my current system. Same thing with the printer, and display should auto detect unless I have a desktop, and let's say I want to run my virtual machine on, let's say, a display, like if I have 3 monitors. Well, if I want to pick a monitor, I can go ahead and specify all of that information here. Printer, controller, network adapter, I've already set that. New CD. So this is just saying use my ISO file, which I already discussed what that was. And processors, I really only need 1. I do have multiple options. My current machine has an i5 with dual cores. I don't really want it to soak up that much of my memory because a virtual machine actually taxes. You are basically running multiple operating systems when you're running a virtual machine. I do not personally want to run multiple operating systems on my machine. Typically, I would set up a dual boot, but for the personal reasons of this presentation, I chose a virtual machine, and I really don't want it to tax my system too hard, so using one of the cores of my processor is plenty sufficient. So I'm going to go ahead and close this because everything looks sufficient for me. And then it's just going to give me a very quick summary of what's about to happen. It tells me how much hard disk space I'm about to use. It tells me if it's going to split it into multiple files. It tells me how much RAM I'm going to have right here. It tells me which version of, which application I'm using. I'm using Workstation 14.x, which is just version 14 with whatever decimal point I'm after. I think mine is 14.2. It tells me the name of the program I'm going to use, the location of the where the virtual machine is going to be located, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go ahead and click finish and see what happens. And there we go. So because I'm using VMware, I'm going to go ahead and power on this machine. This may take a few minutes because essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating a BIOS for a system, and I'm going to offer it the chance to install. So here's what I'm going to do. It says this information. I don't need it to show this hint again. However, I leave it just for me in case anybody comes on my machine and operates it separately. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. That's something you can read if you're liking it, if it's of your liking. So as you can see, this is particularly the Linux Mint boot up. It's going to take a few minutes to install. Essentially what I'm doing is installing this on an empty BIOS. It should eventually finish or give me choices as to how I would like to install, and it will continue, and then I will have Ubuntu. This says Ubuntu 64-bit number 2, but in my case, I'm not so worried about it. Because of the way the virtual or VMware is set up, I can click this machine, and as you can see, I can move around my pointer. If I want to get off of it, I just click outside of it. As you can see, I'm not back inside of it, but if I click inside, I'm inside. So here we go. I have officially installed a Linux Mint. This is a simple bootloader. This says, okay, you're on a trial version. If I wanted to have like a live USB, which would allow me to operate on multiple operating systems, provided I had access to my BIOS. However, and typically I do run that system. But if you're not interested in running that, and let's say you want to operate a machine within a machine, this virtual machine would take care of that. I'm going to go ahead and click Install Linux Mint here. As you can see, I'm inside my system. And this little dial says I'm thinking. I'm outside of the dial, as you can tell. Yes, I want English, so I'm going to click Continue. If you speak whatever language, you can cycle through the languages. That's up to you. Yes, because I set it up with 20 gigabytes of hard drive space, I have at least 9.5, and yeah, I'm not connected to the internet. Well, that's okay. We're going to click Continue. I mean, those were just for best results. Again, I'm in a virtual machine, so it doesn't matter that I'm going to do this erase and install. This is the same thing if you were to install Linux Mint dual boot alongside of whatever system you're operating on, whether it's a Mac OS or a Windows OS. I'm using Linux because that is the most common one that I would prefer to use. And everything else seems pretty legit, so I'm going to go ahead and click Install now. This will take a few minutes. It tells me that it's going to format my hard drives for me. A lot of times operating systems are very self-explanatory on how they're going to do this. Just going to click Continue. And as you can see, now it's going to ask me where am I at, what time zone am I in. I'm going to go ahead, and I'm not in New York. I'm in this time zone here, so I got to click it and let it take a minute to work. Go ahead and click Continue. Obviously, I'm not in Los Angeles, but it will still work. It's asking what my keyboard layout is. It'll tell me to detect. Detect will run you through a series of tests. I don't need to do that because I am in the US. English US is my current layout. So I'm going to go ahead and click Continue. Obviously, as you can look over here, there are several different versions. But again, mine is standard Windows type desktop. My name, for shites and giggles, I will call this Smith. I'm going to name myself John Smith. Oop, I misspelled it. John Smith. And I'm just going to leave it as the computer's name. Username John. For password, typically I would tell you to pick whatever password you would like. But I'm just going to make this one password. And I'm just using my standard keyboard because I'm not super worried about this. This isn't a hardening my systems how-to. This is more of a how do you get something going inside your virtual machine, or how do you get a virtual machine set up, rather. I don't want it to log in automatically. I would never recommend that to anybody. I would require your password to log in. Encrypt my whole folder. That's neither here nor there. So I'm going to go ahead and click Continue. And while that's working, again, it's going to go a little bit slower because it's operating a machine inside of my machine. Right now, it's currently going to install the Linux Mint operating system inside of my machine. Now, while that is installing, I'm going to give you a demonstration of maybe another potential operating system you may want to use. By the way, again, VMware is a installed machine. This costs money. I don't remember exactly how much. Again, I'm using a license. So because of that, I went ahead and I went to whatever internet browser you prefer to use. To be perfectly honest with you, and this may sound crazy, I actually like Microsoft Edge. That doesn't mean that it's my favorite one, but for now, it's what I've been using. I'm going to go ahead and show you a virtual machine lookup. So virtual machines. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Hold on. Virtual machine. So if I look up virtual machines, it's going to say, oh, you can use this one, you can use this one. Oracle is, or VirtualBox, as you can see right here, VirtualBox. This is a free, completely free virtual machine application. It will allow you to install multiple operators on your machine, you would just click this download button. It'll download it and install it. Just follow the wizard that comes with the VirtualBox and install it. Now, I have already done this, so I'm not going to do it again. But that being said, I will open it up so you can see kind of what it would look like at its basis. One second while I get that opened up. Now, there are multiple different applications that you can use to open a virtual machine. If you are using Windows and you are comfortable in entering your BIOS, and your BIOS has the ability to do so, you can use Hyper-V, which is Windows version of VMware or VirtualBox. And unfortunately, my VirtualBox is not showing up, so I may... Oh, nope, there it is. So I found my VirtualBox by searching my computer quick. It's currently in the startup process. If you look at it, this is still installing, it's still running, but oh, it looks like I didn't actually finish my install of VirtualBox. See? So if you once you download it, go ahead and click next. You want it to install. This gives you a set of where it's going to install. It tells you what it's like, what it wants to install. I'm going to go ahead and click next here. I would like it to create, these are all pretty self-explanatory issues that you may want or not want. Click next. That's fine. I don't mind if it install. I actually do mind that it's going to restart my network connection because I'm currently installing here. I believe that everything is installed, so if it breaks it, it breaks it. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and proceed with my installation. I'm going to go ahead and click install. And this is going to take a few minutes to set up. Oh, Windows gave me the do you want to do this? I didn't used to do that, but it does it now with Windows 10. So while that's installing, we'll check on this status. So again, back to what is it? What can you do? So what can you do with a virtual machine? So virtual machines are useful for many different things. They can do anything from run network scans to other things. You name it, and a virtual machine can do it. Anything you can do on your operating system, provided you have the hardware for it, you can do on your virtual machine. So there it goes. It said, okay, my virtual machine is installed. I'm going to go ahead and click finish. Or not my virtual machine. It's not a virtual machine. It's the application to run a virtual machine. And I went start. I'm waiting for it to go ahead and work on what it's doing. As you can see, there was my home screen. I still have access to both, which is kind of nice because as this is installing, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to open a virtual machine I already have installed. So I'm in VMware. Go ahead and click open virtual machine. And let's see, I know it was in documents and it was under virtual machines, and I have all of these here. These are my virtual machines. Kali Linux is what I typically use, and this was actually a pre-made image, which if you go on the internet, you can find a pre-made image. So what I'm doing is I'm going ahead and I'm getting ready to start this one up, which is kind of cool because what it means is that at the same time as I have this one started, I can also have this one started. So as you can see, my Linux Mint is still operating. If I, still working quite well. It's asking me all Windows. It's about done. Probably about another 10 minutes. Now it's going to be slow because I am operating on a machine that is currently at this point running two different machines. But we can go ahead and tax my machine a little more. So here's my VirtualBox. This is another version. I'm going to go ahead and click New. I've already downloaded several ISOs. So I'm going to, I don't want to install another version of Windows, but what's cool is I can download, here's another one. This will give me several different versions of operating systems. Mac OS X. Some people, although unethical, use what they call a Hackintosh to operate under Mac OS. I will do that eventually, although it's unethical, mainly so that I can become familiar with the Macintosh operating system for my career. But at the same time, I'm not actually going to use it. I'm going to use Linux right now, and I'm going to call this one my fun drive. Still give it a name. Go ahead and click next. I'm not an expert necessarily. I'm comfortable, but I'm not an expert. I like to give myself enough RAM, so I usually give myself around a gig. And then there's a gig of memory. So I'm going to click next. Use an existing hard disk file. Create a virtual hard disk now. Do not add a virtual hard disk. I'm going to use I could use an existing one. I don't have any, but I'm going to go ahead and create one. So I click create. This tells me which one I want to use. I'm going to go ahead and use an image because I have images. These are just different options you can use. I'm going to click next. Yes, I would like the storage to dynamically allocate, meaning it will get larger as needed, but I don't need it to use, and it explains it right here, as you can see. So I'm going to click next. My fun drive. Now it's asking me how much space I want. 10 gigs is plenty for me. I don't need that much. I'm going to go ahead and create my fun drive. I'm going to go ahead and start this one. So right now what I have is an empty Linux BIOS when it installs. While that's doing that, let's go back here, see how we're doing on our Linux Mint install. Looks like we're doing okay. This one, my VirtualBox is taking quite a minute, so we'll just give it a few minutes. So here's what it gave me. Let me get this dragged over if it'll let me. So this is what it gave me right now. It gave me pretty much kind of a dead one. I didn't give it an image to install, so it's probably going to give me a nice little fat error or ask me to install something at a later date. Move this up here. I actually messed up the installation on that, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and shut this system down. It's good. It's a good lesson. So this will happen from time to time. So I'm just going ahead and power off the machine. I'm going to click OK. Just think about it. It's basically a computer that's in your current machine. So continuing on, I'm going to go ahead and create another new one. Try to get another one installed up. I'm going to call this one a Linux box. I'm going to call it a Linux V box. Version gives me a bunch of different ones. This one has Linux. I would like to do a Linux 64-bit machine. And I'm going to go ahead and call it, I'm going to say next. Yeah, I don't want it to have that much, but I want a gig again, so get it up to about 1,000. I'm going to use an existing virtual hard disk. I'm going to browse my machine. I'm going to go to my downloads because that's where all of my ISO files are. I guess not. Yeah, well, I'm not as super comfortable with VirtualBox as I used to be. I'm going to create that. Go ahead and try a different version. Dynamically allocated is fine. Linux VBox, it's telling you where it's going to go in my VirtualBox VMs. And that's fine, so I'm going to create. Let's do one more. I want Linux. Maybe we have, here we go, we got a Ubuntu. And we're going to call this one Ubuntu. Ubuntu. Next. That's fine. Use an existing one. I want my downloads. That's not giving me what I would like. That's upsetting. Let's go cancel that. Let's power this guy on again real quick and see what happens. Anyway, back to here. Let's see. So right now it's still downloading. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. I'm going to go ahead and power off. I'm not worried about it because this is not what I have. And this is unfortunately not really helping me. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And I'm going to close out VirtualBox. VirtualBox isn't too bad. It's a very useful software. I'm going to go ahead and open up VMware again. I'm going to do it over on this screen that I have here. And scrolling down until I find VMware. Right there. VMware Workstation Pro. So this is going to open in a second. And as you can see, I have a couple of different workstations. So this is my Kali Linux. This is the one I actually use. I'll just show you what it looks like when it's operational. And run through a quick rundown. So it's starting up my Kali Linux, which is an operating system I installed. This allows me to operate on my Windows 10 laptop a different operating system. This is incredibly useful for pretty much anything you can imagine. This one in particular, because this distribution of Linux grants me the ability to really check out what my network is doing. And I have to click to get on. But if I want to get off, I just click outside of the screen. I'll show you in a minimized version. Here, let's see. See if oh, that was not the right password. Oh, that wasn't either. There we go. So I remembered my password. And as you can see, this is my Windows 10 machine over here. This is my application that is allowing me to run Kali Linux, which is taking a minute, but it is working. And here we are. So again, this is my Windows machine. I can do things on my Windows machine. However, I can also do things on my virtual machine. Here's my Firefox inside my virtual machine, which is connected via the internet based on how I have my things set up. Currently, mine will only detect the Ethernet port. So I should not have internet access. I guess I do. All right, let's continue. Let's check. So here, as you can tell, I'm not online. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and shut down my guest. Guest is the standard term for a guest operating system. I'm going to go ahead and shut that down so it'll allow me to get to the setup. Looks like it's taking a minute. Let's give it a minute. 1 or 2. It's still just shutting down. So as you can see, it does take a little bit of time. I'm only on an i5 processor, especially an older i5 processor. I mean, the machine I'm on right now is probably like 6 years old, which is kind of dinosaur-y in computer types. Just give it a second. It's taking time. I mean, it's still counting up. It says it. I mean, if you look, it tells you, about how long this should take. Right now, it's taking a sweet time. But if I'd given it another processor, it might have gone a little faster, or another core, it would have gone a little faster. And which you are entirely able to set up when you install a new system. Oh, there we go. It's finally decided I could shut off, and now I'm here. So I didn't have internet, so I'm gonna go to my custom here. You just double click on what you would like to set up. I would like this to. I'm gonna go to custom, and I'm gonna use VM8. I can do host only. Means I'm only sharing with the host. I can use the host IP. I'm actually going to go ahead and use the host IP. I could also click options, and I could go, okay, well, how do I want to do this thing? I mean, there's so many different settings. Basically, the world is your oyster when it comes to the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it on NAT. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Well, let's try running it again. Let's see if I get on the internet this time. Yes, I want to run it. That's fine. I want the Kali Linux. To run. Let's let it run its boot up process, and then I will see if the internet works. If the internet works, you will see that I am able to operate a second independent machine from my current machine's software setup. Going back to what I have here, and it will be fairly interesting. I mean, this gives you my hard drive status, this gives you my network adapter, USB, and this tells you the actual USB that I have plugged into my current physical machine. I needed a Wi-Fi adapter because mine was broken. Alright, so it's logging in. Linux, luckily for us, is a fairly lightweight system. What I mean by lightweight is it doesn't take a whole lot of memory to run. And because of that, it will allow me to be able to utilize my i5 to the fullest. And I'm just to show you, I can bring over my Blackboard over here and show you that I can have them side by side. So this is Linux right here. This is Kali Linux. This version of Linux is a very good cybersecurity. It has a bunch of applications that I can use. If I bring the drop-down menu, it'll show you. I mean, these are really good for hardening your system, which means making it protected from, espionage, to checking your networks. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time because this is just a virtual machine demo, but I could run an Nmap search on this and discover all the ports in my network. So again, this is Windows, this is Firefox that I'm using on this side, and we'll open Firefox on this side. As you can see, it gives you a nice little loading deal. Oh, and you can see I'm online. Let's go ahead and Google virtual machine. As you can tell, I am now accessing the internet As you couldn't tell before, this says I have a connection. I am now connected through my machine's wireless to this machine. In order to make sure you power off properly, don't suspend. Go ahead and shut down the guest. Wait, no, cancel that. Let's actually shut down the guest like it would a regular system. Because you think about it, this is its own independent computer. Although it's virtualized, which means it's an artificial computer, it is still a computer. You can still wreck the system's file systems by not turning it off properly. I actually want to power off my machine, and it will go through a series of power off processes. When you saw me turn it off before, that was not the correct way to power it off. At this point, because I'm in VMware, it tells me, hey, this machine is not on. I can power on this machine, I can edit its settings, I can upgrade it. I'm not going to do that. And you have officially heard my very brief, although long-winded, explanation of a virtual machine and really how to set one up. If you are a computer science student or looking at a computer science field, it would be very important for you to understand how virtual machines work. I have had to use them for a multitude of varieties. Some programs I've had to write solely in Linux because they need to operate on a Linux distribution. Linux distributions are not the same thing as Windows. So you will not be able to program everything you program in just Windows, and you will not be able to program everything you can program in just Mac. Virtual machines give you access to a very broad variety of operating systems, and it is a very valuable tool for you to use in your future. Ethically, there are recent reasons to believe that they are not as secure as they should be, namely the Intel hack, which actually, if you are a very good hacker or security specialist, you may be able to utilize tools to access a machine through its virtual machine. Several benefits of a virtual machine are that you can really antivirus your machine. You can grant your virtual machine access to your computer and clean it up. Hopefully. I mean, it just depends on how good you are. The sky's really the limit when it comes to virtual machines. There's so much that can be said for them and so much that can be done for them, it would be impossible to cover. I have already gone over the 30-minute time limit I had set for myself. I am almost up to 45 minutes. Therefore, I will finish this how-to video. My name is Ryan Stobbe, and I received a lot of this information from the internet. Geeks for Geeks is a website that I used to understand. It's actually geeksforgeeks.com to understand really how virtual machines work and what their uses are, and really how to set them up. You do a Google for virtual machines, you'll find numerous sources. Just to give you a short list of potential machines, Hyper-V is the Windows dominant as long as you're comfortable for BIOS. Virtual machine, you can go in, activate it through your BIOS, and then proceed afterwards to implement it. VMware, which is what I'm most comfortable with. Thank you to Computer Security, really enhanced my knowledge of it. VirtualBox, which as you saw, I was not as comfortable with, and was having a little bit of a hard time getting my operating system to work, and the installation process was taking quite a long time in the background. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope it made things a little more clear. If it confused me, feel free to email me. My email is Ryan, R-Y-A-N, .Stobbe, S-T-O-B-B-E, so B as in boy, B as in boy, E as in Edward, @gmail.com. Feel free to ask me any questions you'd like. I'll be happy to do my best to answer them, and if I can't answer them, I have Google as a backup, and we'll answer them that way. Thank you for time, and I hope you enjoyed my how-to video on virtual machines.